Welcome back to Division I Rejects. I'm your host, Kobe Manzo. Had a long weekend. We're back in Marquette. We're back in the studio. I was going to say it might be a shorter episode tonight, but I just had two really great conversations that are going to fill up at least 40 to 45 minutes of your time tonight. I'm super excited about this episode. One of those things where you didn't have maybe very high expectations. You come out of it, you're like, damn, that was awesome. A big part of that, head coach over at University of Findlay, the D2 squad in the GMAC, Kory Allen. He joins me shortly. Had an absolute blast with him. Really enjoyed getting him on the show. This is episode 154. This is the first time you're joining us here. You're watching us on YouTube. Hello. Otherwise, listening on Spotify, podcast, wherever. Go ahead, hit that subscribe, hit the follow, whatever the hell it is. Drop a review, rating on some of those audio platforms. That means a lot. But today's March 18th, as I'm recording this. Like I mentioned, head coach from Findlay, Kory Allen, is joining me here shortly, and then Matt Schwarzler, our NAIA insider, will close out the second half of this episode. We've done D2, we've done D3 guys going pro, and what guys we think will have a chance at the next level. How about some NAIA guys? So we got, I think, 5 guys in the docket today that we'll break down, watch a little bit of film, and just talk about them moving on to the next level. Otherwise, I'll lead this thing off with a wild stat coming out of the transfer portal that you're going to want to stick around and hear. But per usual, find all those topics and more. Use the timestamps, the video chapters underneath on YouTube. All of those will be listed in the description on audio version as well, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Do not forget to subscribe. Follow us on the socials. And let's get right into this thing with the head coach of the Findlay Oilers, Kory Allen. Joining the show tonight, a man that, if I had to guess, probably bleeds oil. Head coach of the Findlay Oilers, Coach Kory Allen. What's going on, Coach? How are you, man?
I'm good, Kobe. Thanks for having me on.
Man, I'm pumped to get you on here, and you're rightfully so shooting it right back at me about our comments on the new field. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Couldn't get the full one over there though, huh?
No, not this time.
No, that's all right. That's all right. But how is otherwise? We'll get into spring ball and some other things later. How's the off season treating you and the boys over there?
The off season's been good. I mean, it's as you know, college football. And everybody says, it's 365 days a year. College football is nothing. It's the same thing as Midwest weather. There's just different seasons, and you got to know what to expect. You know, there's fall, winter, spring, and summer, and we've made it through the winter months, which is that harder recruiting, and we're on to spring now, and you embrace what's in front of you, right? And that's what we're doing.
I like that. I haven't heard that little analogy before. I like it, and as someone who has lived that weather, those changing of the seasons for a lot of years, it hits home. It definitely does. Talk about, that season that we're getting through right now and that signing class. You guys brought in a good chunk. Do you feel like you're already in a spot where you're pretty good and you've rounded out that class? Are we still making additions? What's the state of the incoming class over there for the Oilers?
Yeah, I wonder, and how many times somebody's asked a coach about a signing class, they go, yeah, we just didn't really meet our needs this year, right? I mean, You don't hear that. Exactly. Everybody's going to tell you that they hit all their needs and they feel good about it. But
I like to throw a couple softballs early now. Don't worry, we'll get into some off speed later on, but softballs first.
All right. Well, we do. We feel good about the group that we brought in, and it did. It's cliche, but I think we hit the needs. But time will tell. They got to get on campus. They got to prove it. I think you always keep a couple slots open for needs coming out of spring ball as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think something that, as the years go on, potentially becomes even more important than bringing in the right guys is keeping the right guys, keeping the guys within the program. And you potentially said it more eloquently than most. Roses are red, violets are blue. We've had no starters transfer. How about you? And just my one, I just thought that was appropriate. I loved it. And you know what? Good on you, Coach, because that is something that you can hang your hat on at the end of the day. I feel like that's a very prideful point for any coaching staff in the country. They would love to be able to say that same thing.
Well, there's a site out there, Athlete Link, that put a study out of FBS, FCS, and Division II, and they said that there's less than 20 programs in the country that didn't have a starter enter the portal, in that mid-year cycle.
I've got it pulled up so the people at least watching on the YouTube portion can see it right now, exactly what you're referencing. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, so that was exciting for us. I mean, I think that, keeping your guys, everybody says, you got to recruit your roster. You have to recruit your roster. Yeah. The interesting thing about that is, and it can come off as cliche, but we're not in the business of recruiting. We're in the business of helping guys find their fit. And if we're not the right fit, because we're not for everybody, then we want you to go somewhere else. And so when we find guys that find their fit here, if you find your fit, you're more apt to stay. And that's important for us. And so it's not just about what you do with them when you're on campus, it's who you attract to begin with.
I like that a lot. And like you said, sometimes that just puts more, maybe pressure isn't the right word, but more of an emphasis, right, on getting those guys who are the right fit from the jump, because then those are the guys that are going to stick around, give you those 4 or 5 years. And I don't know if you saw that clip from Kirby Smart, total tangent, but I guess maybe not necessarily, about the guys that are foregoing their senior year of high school. And he was talking about, he's like, I don't want those guys on my team. Like, that's just an absurd idea. But the fact that we're just having these conversations now that I don't know anyone would have believed maybe 5, 8, 10 years ago that these things would have even been talked about in the football landscape. A lot going on, man. You've been through a lot of it. You've been involved with this program for a long time, but getting into spring ball with this specific squad, is it, you guys got started probably, what, a couple weeks ago now, or no, just more recently?
Saturday.
Okay,
we got one of the.
Very fresh. Perfect. What's standing out about this this squad, this group of guys, or is it too early to tell with these guys?
No, I don't think it's too early to tell. I think with the, the individual skill development that you're allowed to do, and the winter workouts, and then what we saw on Saturday is what we expected to see, which is a group that's really, really hungry, a group that's really talented, young in certain spots, but they have a lot of ability. And so I think it's a really good blend of really what's going to be our upcoming junior class and our upcoming sophomore class. Those guys, mixed with a really quality group of seniors. It's, again, there's a lot of experience, but still youth at the same time. So I think it makes it unique.
Absolutely. Good blend got going on over there. And taking a look at, I've got it pulled up for the people watching, that field that we alluded to in the beginning, right? Talk about how much of a game changer exactly that is. And were you guys previously in the gym for these kind of spring practices, or were you over at the field that you typically play on? What did the spring practice schedule look like before you brought in the new sheet of turf?
Yeah. So basically, we're a bit landlocked here at the University of Findlay. We sit right off North Main Street. And when you had to go to practice, when we got out of meetings, until this new facility was put in this fall, you would go get in your car and you would drive over an overpass, over top of a railroad track, and you'd go park there. And we shared that facility with a lot of different teams. And so the ability to get individual work and extra work done, if our guys want to stay out there after practice or get out early, or, if you decided on either side of the ball, a coordinator said, hey, film is good, but man, we got to walk this today. We really need to walk through during that meeting time. We couldn't do it because an offsite practice facility. Once we got there, it was good, but it was also shared by a lot of other sports. And so it was necessary for us to add this. It's right out of the back of our building. It's wedged right in between the indoor track and field center and then our football facility building, which sits in the opposite end zone. And for us just to be able to walk right up the steps out of our locker room, step onto the field and do football, it's been outstanding.
A little bit of call that like a Green Bay Packers situation beforehand?
Potentially.
Yeah. But no little kids lining up after practice to lend bikes on the way back?
No. To say that there were guys in the back of pickup trucks every now and again with shoulder pads and helmets on. Yeah, I mean, you get a little Giants feel out of that once in a while.
I would argue that is way cooler in its own right, and much more football guy-like. But with the draft coming up, I kind of mentioned it before we got going here. Findlay's a program that you guys have sent quite a few guys to the pros in like very recent history, last decade. And whether that is the NFL or some of these other leagues that have popped up, you're giving guys opportunities at the next level. I would assume that as a guy who has recruited and brought a lot of young potential student athletes to the university, that has to become a big part of your pitch. And knowing that for these young student athletes, the pathway is already there. And the teams and these different leagues know to look at this school because we've got quality products coming out of here.
Yeah, I think that I remember way back in 2018, thank you, redshirt and COVID years. They were here at Jason Moore and, who played 4 years with the Chargers and a couple of our other guys. But they looked at a freshman offensive tackle, Mike Jarrell, and he's got his pro day this Wednesday down at Ohio State.
Know all about Mike.
The one guy said, he goes, Coach, I just came from, I'll leave it as an unnamed SEC school. He goes, their freshman linemen don't look like him. But and so that's where we've been able to, all the credit though goes to the kids that have developed themselves, but also our strength staff, Kobe. I mean, our strength coach has been here for longer than me. And he's Findlay born and bred. He was raised here. He played baseball here. His wife works in the community, and awesome. He's been offered opportunities in the Big Ten and the NFL in the last 5 years and turned them down. This is his home. He loves watching guys. Our strength and conditioning program is unbelievable. He gets them in a position to succeed. And Chad Wagner's his name, and we're so fortunate to have him. I mean, the weight room's where it's at.
That is big, and that's maybe an underappreciated part of when you talk about that pro development, because it's very easy to understand that you're going to have to mold the 17 or 18-year-old that's coming into a college program and still filling out a frame. And not all guys are like Jarrell that come in and look like an SEC offensive lineman. There's a lot of guys that need those couple of years to develop. The redshirt year is definitely a large benefit in disguise for many guys at the college level. But then you hear about guys going from college to the NFL, and in some cases, not all, but some cases, they got to break them all the way back down again to build them back up the way they see fit. And so if you can, you're not going to pass that with flying colors, but if you can mitigate that period of adjustment or even just shorten that because you're physically prepared and you've gone through some of these same deals, once again, you're setting yourself up, or you're setting your student athletes up for success and a shorter adjustment period at the next level, which is maybe arguably just as important as getting there in the first place, is just staying there and finding a spot on the roster. And you just had a guy who semi-recently made the Colts 53-man, which is an awesome move. And then you look at the now UFL with the Battlehawks, and just like some great examples of recent guys from your squad. But talk about some guys in this year's class. You already brought up Jarrell. I was going to bring him up. You beat me to the punch, so congrats there. But also the tight end position, a guy like Ragerman who's made some noise, obviously, respectably so, the numbers and production that he's had. What is it about these guys that makes them some ideal prospects?
Yeah, I mean, Mike and Mike, they were our guys. Offensive player of the year in the league, and offensive lineman here. Ragerman is a kid that he'll be at Toledo tomorrow, and obviously they have a corner who's being talked about as going in the top 10 of the draft right now. Okay. So there's going to be a lot of eyes in Toledo, Ohio tomorrow, and I think Mike's going to show really, really well. Mike Ragerman, the tight end. Now I'm not gonna tell you what he told me he would run the 40 in, because I mean, they'll show him, give him a speeding ticket if he runs that fast. But he is very confident in his prep. Ragerman's a kid that was a state champion wrestler up in New York, and grew up in Western New York, not far from where I grew up. And I think if he was down here in Ohio, he might have gotten some more attention coming out of high school. Okay. And was a guy that just, developed throughout the program and came in as a 225 pounder. He played at 255 pounds. And has unbelievable ball skills, and is a tough competitor. And I think, I told all the scouts when they came in, hey, if you're looking for a hybrid, and he's an off the ball guy, he's going to measure in at 6'3" on the button, 255 pounds. He's not 6'5" on the ball, hand in the dirt guy. But if you want to move him, we never took him off the field. And so, I expect him to have a really big day tomorrow. Be excited to follow up and see how he does. And then Jarrell, played in the Hula Bowl and did his training down in Fort Myers the last couple months. And I expect him to test really well down at Ohio State. So it'll be good.
Hell yeah. Good for Mike and Mike, man. But talking about the Mike that catches passes and getting into Toledo, how much of a challenge is it for those guys to get maybe into some of those pro days? And obviously it helps when you have some of the accolades that he has. Is that more on their representation and their agents to get them in there, or connecting them with the scout, or does that have anything to do with the coaching staff? Talk us through that process.
Yeah, a lot of times, and I don't want to speak for every school that hosts a pro day, but a lot of times what you're dealing with, Kobe, is there needs to be a request, right? By an NFL team, i.e. a scout saying, we'd like to see this guy. Because at the end of the day, if you told me, hey, give me 6 months, I can go work out for an NFL team, I may try to do it still, right? It's not for everybody. It's not. So, if you get that invite, if you get that, hey, we want to see you, then that's what's going to happen. And that's what's happened in Mike's case, both Ragerman and Jarrell.
Yeah, I love it, man. And like I said, those guys, two guys that are probably pretty easy to vouch for because they have that just wealth of experience and the film and everything to back them up. But for some guys, it is a little bit more difficult. We've talked a lot about some D3, and we'll talk more later in this episode about some NAIA guys that are trying to make that jump. And again, the further you get down, there's still dudes that can play, but it just becomes harder and harder to crack it and get into one of those settings. Lots of applause to the guys that do make it happen. With that being said, had the Colts and the Lions come by the facility the other day to check out some of your guys. How did that come about?
That's something that they do every spring.
Awesome.
And that's just it's just a way to get numbers out there, right? And they work throughout their organization, and those numbers get shared out, not just with those teams, but with other teams in the league. And, we have some rising seniors that went out and ran and put down some really good times. So we're excited to see what they do coming back in the fall, and, we'll go from there.
Now, to shift over and talk about more maybe the program as a whole, right? You're a guy, I mentioned it in the beginning. You've been involved with this program, maybe not as long as strength conditioning coach, right? But damn near. Like, you have been a part of this program before I was born, potentially. No, a little bit after. Just a little bit of a gap there. But that says enough, right? And so you've experienced a lot of success with this squad, and even on the national level, this team has seen a lot of success. Now, it feels like, I said it maybe earlier, that you guys just these last couple of years, just as recently as 2021, where you win the conference and make a trip to the playoffs, but these last couple of years, you are winning big-time games. You're in contention for the conference every year. You're just scratching the surface, and you're so close to breaking through. You've seen what it takes to take that next step, to be on the national stage and have that success. What is it going to take for this squad to do that, and how beneficial is it to have that blueprint?
Yeah, I think having the blueprint is really important. I think that that's a question, Kobe, that could go a lot of different ways. I think that we represent ourselves. We also represent the GMAC, and in our conference, I think at the very top of it is outstanding. But our conference, and we're a part of that, needs to prove that on the national stage consistently. Yeah, they just do. I think that there's a bunch of teams. If you go back to after the COVID year, so 21, 22, 23, there's been a different champion every year. Findlay won it, Ashland won it, Tiffin won it. And now you need to look at finding that success in the national playoffs. And so for us, that win that we had over number 2 in the nation against Shepherd in 2017, for the players on our team now, that's another lifetime. So you stack some more big wins. But I think a lot of that has to do with what you're doing from a scheduling perspective, right? And so, we scheduled Truman State last year. We're going back out to Truman State. We're going up to Wayne State week 2. We signed a contract 25, 26 to play the University of Indianapolis, right? Like, we're not trying to just line up lob balls here. We want to play good football teams. Then we want to go into conference play. And I think it goes in line with, and now you got to stack recruiting classes, and you got to keep them, right? So then it goes back to finding that fit. And, I really look at the year 2022, I look at that, my first year as head coach, that was year 0. Last year was year 1. We need to take off in year 2 and bring ourselves back to, that national playoff contention. But, here we stand last year, we were 7-2, 9 weeks into the season with 8 quarters to go. And we lost just a heck of a football game. If you weren't on our side, we lost a 4 overtime thriller, which, if you want to ask me my opinion on NCAA overtime rules, I'll dive deep into that. But it was a great 4 overtime game. We came up 1 play short. And then that put us in a situation where now we're going to be home again. But we were 8 quarters away from being right back there. And so now it's that idea of we have to push ourselves over the edge. We got to lead, no doubt.
You talked about that conference that has seen quite a bit of parity. Obviously, you mentioned it earlier on, but also just new faces, right? And whether it is just more teams kind of defecting down from the GLIAC or annexing from different areas, this conference has changed so much in just the past 5 to 8 years. You talk about some of those additions. Ashland is obviously one of the bigger ones in recent history, but also teams like Northwood in very recent history. What has this conference done? Has it gotten better over that time span? And do you see, maybe, you talk about the top upper echelon of that conference being very stout and competing well on the national stage, which I would very much agree with, but has the depth gotten better, and has, teams 4 through 8, has that improved, at least in your eyes, in the last few years there with some of those more annexations?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that the improvement of I guess what people, if you just look at the standings, right? I'm not just these are the teams that are 4 through 8. Look at the scores. That's what tells you that they're closing the gap. It may not be the win-loss right now, but when you look at when we jumped into this league in 2017, coming off of years of GLIAC play, right? Now we had a good football team, and that football team beat Shepherd in the national playoffs, but we were having 60 and 70 on them on most of the teams that we had played for the very first time. And now those teams that we're still playing, that's not the case, right? That gap is getting closed, every single year. And so I think that people understand. I mean, I think that's the idea about, when you play in a league like we did for so many years, like the GLIAC, you're either going to go into Allendale and Big Rapids and get your head kicked in, or you're going to get a better football team.
Hell yeah.
You have two choices.
Yeah. And guess what? I've seen both up close and personal. Can attest to that statement 100%. But talking about the rhetoric and I guess the sentiment going forward with your team and this squad moving forward in the spring and heading into the fall, where you've got these challenges stacked up and you do have these expectations because, like you said, you talk about making that jump. Is a lot of that and your message to the squad like, hey, we're right here, right? Like this is, I think of, and this might be maybe a little bit of an obscure poll, but I think of the image of the two miners and the one guy, it just keeps digging, and the one turns away right before he's about to reach the diamonds, right? Or whatever the hell the jewel or the gem in the dirt is. That feels to me kind of like what, and again, I'm not in the locker room. What the hell do I know? But am I spot on there? Am I off the mark? What is the rhetoric right now towards these guys and how close you guys are to accomplishing something, not that you haven't already, is pretty special?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right? Okay. Because you don't know, and again, it's coach speak 9 times out of 10 because it's true. You don't know what it is that we're going to do tomorrow in our meetings, in our practice, right? In our post-practice, in our meetings on Wednesday. What is it that you're going to do tomorrow that's going to give you an opportunity to win a game against Truman State week 1? It's going to give you an opportunity to win the game week 2 up in Detroit when we go play Wayne State, and then on into conference play. Something that we do tomorrow is going to affect the outcome of that game. And if you don't believe that, then you're not in the right program. If you don't believe that, then you're playing the wrong sport. Because why do we do all the things, right? Us football guys got to be the craziest dudes out there. We practice and we practice and we practice and we practice for the opportunity to play just a little bit of football. And so for us, if you don't believe that, then you're completely misguided. We talk to our team all the time of, are we an outcome-based team or a fight-based team? Outcome or fight? Outcome-based teams check the scoreboard. Outcome-based teams are worried about, hey, we have to win, or hey, we should win this game, or I don't know about this game, right? Be about the fight. Right? Go stand in the ring. Let's be about the fight. And so that's all spring ball is a fight, because there is no outcome, right? We're not playing another team. So we're going to be about the fight for 15 practices and then see where we're at.
Hell yeah. That's awesome. That is awesome, Coach. I'm pumped. I'm ready to go, man. My heart's pounding. That's good. And now you've got that one in the books. Now you've already got it out, and all you just got to do is recite that to the boys whenever you get back out on the field. You're going to have a team full of dogs that are ready to fight. They already are, though. I know that. But that's all I got for you, Coach. I appreciate the hell out of you. I've really enjoyed this conversation, man. I'm pumped to see what you guys do this fall, and excited to hear that you embrace a challenge. You go out and you want to embrace this adversity earlier in the year and get your guys geared up and prepared for what should be hopefully a long season for you guys down there in Ohio.
Well, I really appreciate it. I appreciate everything you do for college football at all levels. It's awesome. Keep doing your thing. And anytime you want to have us on, or anytime you want to make a trip down to Fintown, we're here.
I'm going to follow up on that. I will. I appreciate that.
Please do.
Absolutely. Thank you, Coach. Have a good night.
You too. Take care, Kobe.
See ya. All right. I appreciate Coach joining me. Really enjoyed having him on here. And before we go over to Matt Chorsler and talk the NAIA guys we think have a chance to go pro, I want to just leave you guys with this statistic. And sue me, I just grabbed it off Twitter earlier today, and it's not vetted for whatever, but this right here, man, only 20% of NCAA Division II scholarship athletes, not just football, athletes, who enter the transfer portal end up receiving a scholarship from another institution. Only 27%, so 27 out of 100 kids who enter the transfer portal are getting an athletic scholarship somewhere else. And Stan says, this is a story that needs to be told. Do the math. 73% give up a scholarship to enter the portal and don't get one to replace it. It goes back to, the grass isn't always greener, right? And leaving doesn't necessarily guarantee you a better situation on the other side. And Stan is at least a somewhat reputable source, vice president for athletics at University of Central Oklahoma right there. And it's not like this guy is just tweeting out of his ass. But I can certainly appreciate this statistic, and it's something that we've talked about ad nauseum on this show, is that, and we're still in the very early stages of it, I think the transfer portal, and speaking relatively, like this has not been around for a long time, and as this continues to be implemented, I actually think, and this could be a crazy take, but I think we'll see those numbers start to go down as far as how many kids are just entering the portal. Because right now, the allure, and I hope that's the right word, but the allure and the incentive to go jump in the portal and what that feels like and the promise on the other side, I think is very tempting to a lot of student athletes, because there is a lot of the unknown. The less unknown and the more known there is this whole transfer portal business, and more stats that come out like this from Stan about the 27% that are actually getting athletic aid on the other side. I think the more info we have is going to just continue to slow that process and maybe change the thought process of these student athletes that are right now very quick to jump into the portal and test the waters. But as we start to figure out more and more of the actual real life consequences of what these actions have, again, I'll take 2 steps back and say once again, I think the transfer portal is absolutely a necessary thing in college athletics. Do I love the way it's been implemented and the way that it currently functions? Maybe not. But I think the idea itself is incredibly necessary and does serve a purpose in college athletics. So if for those of you who haven't heard my rants on that before, that's kind of my stance on it. But I do think, kind of going back to my original take, the more we find out and the more info and data that comes out as they're able to track this data and information over these next couple of years, the more we're going to see students that are maybe a little bit more well-advised and have maybe a more in-depth thought process. Because that's one of my biggest gripes with the transfer portal, is that you can be in the transfer portal in like half an hour or an hour. Like, it doesn't take very long if you assuming you get the correct communication with your compliance officer at your university. These things can happen in the same day. And so for me, most of them aren't impulse decisions, but having the ability to make that decision that quickly and how much that impacts the life of one of these student athletes, crazy. But wanted to leave you guys with that statistic right there. 27% of the D2 scholarship athletes who enter the transfer portal end up receiving a scholarship from another institution. Just thought it was worth saying. Take it as you may, with one grain of salt, with the whole bag of salt. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just here to give the information. I'm just the messenger. But we'll move over to NAIA with the man, Matt Schwarzler. Finish out the episode talking some draft stock of some NAIA studs. Joining the pod to close out the night, we talked a lot about D2 and D3 guys potentially going to the pros, but we've left the NAIA untouched. That ends tonight, Matt. We're going to talk about a couple guys that we think have a great shot to make it at the next level. There are certainly guys out there. We've got, 5 tonight that at least we wanted to highlight and kind of go over, but excited to break some of these guys down, dude. Good to have you back as well, of course, a little hiatus.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thank you. Yeah, the NAIA, man, it's always fun to talk about draft prospects, because I think out of all the lower levels of college football, the NAIA is the one that doesn't get as much love when it goes to going pro.
For sure.
Obviously, in the past couple of years, we've had a guy from Culver Stockton go pro. We've had a guy from, I think, Indiana Wesleyan also go. But for the most part, a lot of these guys, get done with football and they move on. But we have a few guys to talk about from last season. And I want to start with my guy from St. Ambrose, Yemi Ward. Absolute stud out of St. Ambrose. Obviously having 883 receiving yards this year, but I mean, he's played all 4 years. This is a guy who has increased his numbers every single year, improved every single year. He's got the physical stats that you like. He's 6'1", 190, perfect size. And he accounted for 14 touchdowns for this team last year.
Big time.
Averaging, 15 yards a catch, almost 100 yards a game. Very impressive year from him. And obviously a St. Ambrose team that didn't make a lot of noise in the national headlines, but Yemi's definitely a guy that stands out from this squad.
100%, dude. And then we'll take a look here at some of his numbers. He got in at the pro day at Northwestern. And when you talk about guys at this level, on this stage, how do they separate themselves and really get themselves on these draft boards or whatever the hell you want to call them? these numbers, my friend, exactly how you do it. 4.44, 40-yard. He had a 37-inch vertical, a 10-foot broad, just like some of the more explosive athletic numbers. I mean, obviously at the wide receiver position, like you want a guy that there's a box that you have to check. A 4.44. That's like a Wendy's mouthful right there, but that is that's a box that is checked. And Jimmy and I talked about a lot this last week, just checking the boxes and not giving teams any reason to rule you out. I think he did just that. By the way, that facility over there at Northwestern. Oh, hey, now.
Big time.
Yeah. I was actually I was not like a brag because I play D2. Well, I don't play at Northwestern, but I was the first camp in that new facility. That place is incredible.
Oh, wow.
It looks even cooler in person. It's literally just this massive glass wall. But that's a picture of Yemi over there. And after his pro day, he put up some fantastic numbers. So that's going to be big time for him. We also did have, I was going to play a little soundbite from his experience at the pro day that I just wanted to pull up and listen to him talk about kind of his experience a little bit, because, you know, we could only talk so much about it without hearing it from the dude himself. So I was gonna play a portion of that real quick. Let's see if I got that up. I do.
Those scouts liked what they saw and wanted to see more. Ward was invited to compete at Northwestern University's Pro Day to perform in front of NFL eyes.
When you get to these pro days, your 40 is really stressed as far as, you know, if you don't run a certain time, they don't want to keep you around kind of thing. So I know that was a huge point. So I know running track here and getting those times and, you know, the records I got here helped a lot.
For an athlete who's so comfortable on a football field, Ward couldn't help but pinch himself when he arrived at the pro day.
So he's talking about being a track guy, too, as we get a good view of that Northwestern practice facility. And we see a lot of that now. I think we've seen it in the past, but we see even more of that now, especially with these guys at these skill positions. That crossover from the track and field side of things. And does it directly correlate maybe to the football day-to-day stuff? Yes, no. But when it comes to running a 40-yard dash, there's probably not a better way to train for it than doing sprints on a the track or whatever.
Absolutely. And I think a cool part too about these NAIA guys that we talk about, a lot of them, and I can't speak for Yemi, but a lot of these guys do actually get the chance to do track, do multiple sports in college, obviously at the lower level. It's a bit different than D1 is in terms of the time commitment and how your schedule works out. So
you're right.
A lot of these guys do bring that experience in, obviously college sprinting experience. Very key, very good to have. And it's clear that Yemi, if nothing else, has track speed.
Yes.
Very obviously. And he's got the physical stature, man. Like, he could absolutely tear it up in the NFL. I think he turned some heads at that pro day.
Yeah, he's listed at 6'1", 190. That's certainly, again, talk about checking boxes. That's not something that jumps off a sheet, but it's also something that's not gonna count him out, right? There's not any numbers there that are gonna be going against him at 6'1", 190. And then his stats on his career, he's got over 2,400 yards receiving, and he's just improved, which is a great sign. Every single year he's improved as far as just the actual numbers go. 88 yards per game last year. Like, that's a really solid number, over 800 yards. You talked about the 14 touchdowns you mentioned earlier. And when you're averaging over 15 a pop, like, that's just something that he's taking advantage of all of his opportunities on a team that, like you said, although they were decent, didn't make a ton of noise in the national, maybe more like the national scene. He's certainly stood out on that squad. So definitely a guy to keep an eye on. But we can move on. Tell me about the safety we got a couple of guys at St. Xavier today, but talk to me about the safety on the defensive end.
Yeah, I was just going to say, man, you want to talk about national relevance, St. Xavier is usually a good spot to go to.
Yep.
Starting out with Ron Carroll, obviously don't have his exact stats for some reason. The website just doesn't have that information on him. So strange. I looked for it everywhere. I couldn't find it. But you look at this dude's highlight tape, and oh my God, talk about a ball hawk. You talk about a freight train. This is a kid when he was like 10 years old, quit football because he was too small.
Yes.
He's 6'1", 185 playing safety, and he hits like a Mack truck. I think he grew just fine, and was, led the team in interceptions as a freshman way back when with 5. Also was one of the team's leading tacklers throughout his career, has been extremely impressive for the St. Xavier team. And you watch him hit. He hits like an NFL guy. He hits like a guy who rolls down the box, takes heads off, and is physical. absolutely physical and was a staple of this defensive unit.
Yeah, 100%. I think the quote here from his coach, Mike Feminis, he says, athletically, he's good enough to play at a higher level. He's really smart, too. He's got great football sense. But this is, I think, the big piece for me, and you watch the tape, and you already mentioned it. He says, quote, his quickness and reaction time, his closing speed are all off the charts. And that was the biggest thing for me is once he makes a decision, here's like a great example of it in the clip right here. He makes a decision, he's downhill immediately, and he is like you said, for a kid that stepped away from football for a little bit because of his size, you would have no inclination and no idea. This kid brings the pads and is like not afraid to get dirty at all, which at the strong safety position is an absolute must. So he was good in pass, defending the pass. Obviously, we see some of that as well, but his run stopping ability is, I think, what separates him from maybe some other guys at that spot.
Absolutely. And I mean, you look at what he's able to do with the closing speed and how instinctual he plays. That's not always something you can coach. That comes with a level of confidence that comes with, what you're actually able to put out on the field. And he clearly knows what he's good at. He knows what he's capable of. It shows how he plays. There's no hesitation in what he does.
Another great quote. My senior year, I started taking football more seriously. I just liked hitting people. Don't we all, man? Let's go, dude. That'll
do it, man. That's all you need.
Oh, I love it, dude. I love it. But no, joking aside, like that's the way he plays the game. Like he plays very free, he plays instinctual, and he flies around and he hits people. And I don't think there's a much better endorsement for guys like that at that position. And when you play on that side of the ball, that's kind of the way your head has to operate. But like you said, couldn't get their website for whatever. I checked the same thing too. I couldn't get on there and get
like every other player on their roster is just fine. You can get everything except his.
Yeah, like, what are we withholding here? I don't know what's going on. So we gotta get that fixed. But we can stick with that squad right over there, but we'll switch to the other side of the ball. How about that? Justin Pringle, the wide receiver over there, man. Tell me what you like about him.
Yeah, and this is a guy who we actually mentioned a couple times. I know on the NAIA F-ball side of things that I help with during the season. We mentioned him a lot. Obviously, this guy was a grad student, a wide receiver punter combo. Would you believe it? Obviously not a...
I saw that on the kicking stats when I pulled it up. I thought it was a typo, but I did check, and it's legit.
Yep. Granted, not many putts, but
no,
still technically a punter. So hey, maybe that'll help him at the next level. I don't know, but obviously he shines on the offensive side of the ball, coming down with catches. Over 1,000 receiving yards, 13 touchdowns last season to his name. Showing out also against some of the best teams in the country. Roosevelt, 120 receiving yards. Olivet Nazarene, 131 receiving yards. St. Ambrose, who we mentioned earlier, went for 156 and 3 touchdowns. I mean, this is a guy who puts up big numbers, big production, extremely fast, and also, to boot, is a pretty damn good kick and punt returner, Had a couple touchdowns there last season as well. Has the size that you like in a receiver, obviously 6 foot 190. Again, not going to jump out on a page, but certainly it's not going to hurt him. And yeah, this is a guy that we've talked about for the past few years in the NAIA, and it's very clear that he's ready for the next level.
Yeah, he's got a good combination of like point A to point B, just talk about like speed, I guess like textbook speed, which just straight line. But then also you talk about a quality in a guy that I think people make the analogy of being in a phone booth and being able to move with not a lot of space and get around defenders and make moves within your frame. I think he does a good combination of both of those. And we see that when you watch the film that he catches the ball and he's able to get separation distance from defenders, but also they love to get him, at least at Xavier, they'd love to get him out on the sweep and out on the outside where he's able to just get shifty on these defenders and make a move. So it feels like a really balanced offensive piece of their personnel, and you see a piece here of the punt returning side of things. We talked about D'Angelo Hardy at D3 and all the special teams, the impact he had for North Central when it came to that aspect of the game. And all that does for going to the next level is bolster your resume. And if you've been doing it in college, that's one less thing you got to worry about and learn at the next level. And there are really good athletes that teams will make excuses. If you're that good at special teams, they will find a way just to keep you on that roster, practice squad, whatever the hell it is. He could certainly be in that boat and find his way onto a 53-man, or maybe even, whether it is a UFL, CFL, whatever the hell he kind of ends up at, man. But whatever it is, I can certainly see it.
Yeah, he's a very balanced receiver, perfect mix of athleticism and technique. You see it in his game. It's just a very consistently good receiver. And I think that's to, that's in his benefit and all the things he can do on special teams. This is definitely a guy who, if he doesn't stand out right away as a receiver, like you will see him returning kicks. You'll probably see him on a kickoff or two. He's fast
Love
enough,
it.
like
Love it.
absolutely could do damage there.
And then a guy that you were high on here from the reigning national champs, man, and a guy that has a ton of, just like all the accolades in the world, man. Wendell, this man, you talk just stats just to read the defensive back of the year, special teams player of the year, multiple of them, NAIA All-American defensive back, 3-time first team All-Conference, and then also All-Conference just as a return man as opposed to just the defensive back position. So you talk about a utility or a Swiss Army knife. This man has done it all for the Seahawks, and now has the opportunity to take it up to the next level, obviously.
Yeah, and congrats to him. Obviously, committing to FAU going D1's a huge thing and will help his draft stock get him noticed a little more. But honestly, this is a guy who could have gone to the draft this year and probably would have gotten on a squad somewhere. He is that talented. He has an eye for the ball. He absolutely flies around on the defensive side, and he's just quick. Like, this is a guy who is able to score on kick and punt returns. Over 400 yards in each category is extremely impressive for a DB. And has an eye for the ball. It's just he's very well-rounded. He's all over the field. He's a guy that you notice just because he's involved in pretty much everything that happens. He's always around. He's always making plays. And he was the guy that we just talked about all the time because he was that good.
Yeah. 100%. And he's another example of Kaiser. They did a good job. The more I look into their team of keeping a lot of these like really talented guys down in Florida, keeping them within the state. And that's a really hard thing to do when you talk about the college presence that is obviously down in Florida, but their ability to have that retention. Have that retention of the guys in that area has been really impressive. And some of the stats on him, man, he's been, I think, amongst other things, incredibly consistent. And the way that he's been able to start just game after game after game for this Kaiser squad, the best ability is availability. And he has been a really good example of that. He was the first Seahawk to earn the Sun Conference Defensive Back of the Year recognition back when he got it for the first time. And talk about 3 straight seasons in a row being that all-conference selection at defensive back. He's the second player in program history to record 100 or more solo tackles in a career at the defensive back spot. Like, we're not, not a linebacker, not a strong safety, not, you know what I mean? Like a alley defender. That's really impressive. And he's just a very well-rounded defensive back. 6 PBUs, 2 fumble recoveries, ranks number 8 in the conference in passes defended. And just like I said, the resume is 100% there. The play is there, and you see it now, his ability to go up and make that jump. He had some big-time offers. I think FAU is probably one of the bigger ones, though, for sure. He has a couple other smaller D1s.
For sure. And I think, too, the one thing that you could argue against him is that he's 5'8", obviously not the biggest guy in the world. But if nothing else, he would be able to play special teams, be a contributor there. And 5'8" isn't even detrimental for a DB. But it's very obvious that where he lacks in height, he makes up for in athletic ability. He makes up for instincts. He makes up for in so many other facets of the game that's something that can be easily excused.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. How cool would it be if we talk about these guys and then they end up on whether it is like a Hard Knocks or whatever, and you get to see these guys go through training camp? Because those are always the ones. Don't get me wrong; it's cool seeing the big names on the Hard Knocks stuff, but that's what makes those publications and those episodes and those things, that's what makes them so interesting. Is you get attached to these bubble guys and these guys that come out of nowhere with the good personalities. I was just thinking it'd be so sweet to have, whether it is an NAIA guy or some small college guy. Like we had, should I think back to just last year, like a Jerome Cap out of Kutztown, the D2, and he wins over the hearts of everyone with the rookie talent show, right? Yeah, and that the M&M piece, that made my whole heart. That was so cool, and we got to get him on this summer. That'd be sweet, but that'd be tangent. That'd be really sweet to see one of these guys in that kind of situation. But let's finish it off with another offensive guy, Tadarian Tay Williams, goes by Tay. He has had quite the journey to Indiana Wesleyan. Certainly didn't start there. Was at ECU for a year before going to Mississippi Valley State, and then has found a home for himself with the Wildcats over there at Indiana Wesleyan. Right, this guy has torn it up. Tell me about him.
Yeah, I mean, he clearly found his fit at Indiana Wesleyan because he rushed for over 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns to his name. I mean, this guy was an absolute monster. He's very well, he's very well versed. He's able to do a lot of different things. He's fast. He's also a pass catching threat out of the backfield, had 4 receiving touchdowns to his name, which is also very good to be versatile, at the running back position nowadays, especially with the how quickly running backs kind of get cycled through at the pro level now. It's definitely good to be able to be what's the
multi-dimensional, man. Yeah,
versatile. Yeah, that sort of thing. So he's been incredible, and this is an Indiana Wesleyan team that obviously gets a lot of national attention. This is a guy that if you paid attention to any of the headlines, like, oh yeah, this is a guy that was getting talked about all the time, and for good reason. And at 5'10", 193, like, that is more than doable. Won't get him knocked out of any, draft boards or consideration because of that. And he's just that good. He's that guy. He's the main staple of this Indiana Wesleyan offense.
Yeah, he definitely was. NAIA All-American first team. He was the MSFA Mideast Offensive Player of the Year, and All-MSFA Mideast first team selection, and that's just this year he's done that. He's started to stack some of those awards, and you have to think if he was at Indiana Wesleyan from the start, he'd probably even have more of those. But he just hasn't had the time to be there and do that. But he was a walking highlight reel this last year, and he had all of the awards and things that come with that at the conference and then the national level as well. And when you talk about guys like this, it helps to be on a squad like Indiana Wesleyan when you're playing obviously tough competition, but then also talking about making that run maybe on a national stage is all gonna help you with film and getting to the next level. But looking at the roster, and you talked about the size a little bit, listed at 5'10", 193, and again, a dude that I was trying to find some numbers for like a pro day or anything and couldn't find anything immediately. So I have to maybe follow up on that. But this was probably one of the first guys that came to mind for me as someone who's just like lit up every publication this year and has a really good shot to make it at the next level.
Absolutely. And at any level of college football, on 18 carries, you run for 288 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's going to put people on notice.
Yeah.
That's going to put people on notice. He did that in October against Taylor. Good God. They followed that up with another 23 carry, 227, 3 touchdown day against Madonna. So we've seen it. He's been very consistent, but when he is on, man, holy cow, get out of the way. You're not stopping this guy. And I'd love to see that at the pro level. And I think he's capable of it, whether he wants to or not. So,
yeah. And like you said, that's the one thing. It's hard to, like, with these guys, some of these guys you're looking and you're trying to find like the actual, like, technical, like, declared, like, whatever. Yeah. Some of them we're just assuming, you know what I mean? But it is what it is. Worst case scenario, we're just hyping up dudes that are done playing and have had a really good careers.
Absolutely.
That ain't so bad.
If nothing else. Yeah.
That ain't so bad. A little free pub.
It ain't terrible.
No, it's not, dude. But yeah, I think that's all we've got for today, dude. That was solid. As always, dude, I appreciate you. Appreciate the insight. Appreciate you coming on here and helping me fill out the episode.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Thank you, brother. Have a good night. I'll see you, Matt.
You too. Take it easy, man.